external parasites, it's certainly an important thing, especially in this area. And guess what? We've got a new one. We've got a new one that's knocking on our door. How many of y'all are from east of here? East of Oklahoma. Where are you from?
Not east of Oklahoma, eastern Oklahoma.
Oh, eastern. Northeastern? Anybody east of Oklahoma? Where are you from? Georgia. You're in the hot zone. So they haven't positively identified, but they think they do have this tick in Georgia. This is called the Asian longhorn tick. Why is it important to you guys? It's because this tick can rapidly expand because it can produce hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of eggs without sexually producing. It goes through asexual development. And so basically it produces females and it can rapidly expand and it can carry bovine Illyria. Bovine Illyria is a protozoan parasite that is one of those that hits your pocketbook. You can tell your animals are just not 100% and you can't figure out what's going on. It's because this tick probably has just transmitted a protozoan known as bovine Illyria. And so when your animals get Illyria or bovine Illyriosis, they are just depressed. They're not really fully sick animal, but they're just not 100%. So, and if for those of you, how many of you guys are kind of in the cow-calf side of things? Any of you on the stalkers, maybe potentially going into backgrounding or stalkers, or haven't even decided yet, kind of on that? So in some settings, it's all about efficiency, and when you get bovine Illyria, it really hits the efficiency of those animals. So they're basically eating more pounds of forage to put on that same pound of beef when they're dealing with that. And this tick can transmit it. We found it in Arkansas. This is where it was found as of June of last year. It's here in North Carolina over here now. They think they found it's in Kentucky now. Arkansas is the furthest west it's been, but it's right on the Oklahoma-Arkansas border. Again, this is where it was initially found in New Jersey and through Virginia. In Virginia, they actually found positive beef animals with bovine Illyria. So how did it get its name? It has nothing to do on the type of animal it gets on. It's called Asian because its native range is Southeast Asia, but we call this the Chinese hat. And these are how it got its name. These are long spurs, and that's how it got its longhorn name. I learned a long time ago when we start calling things by their common name, it has nothing to do with what kind of animals you're going to get them on. So the thing that we want to think about is that this tick can rapidly expand. It's a fairly small tick. This is a dime. This is an adult. Most of the adult ticks that you get on your cattle are probably twice the size of this. So it's a small tick, kind of hard to see, but it's a major pest that's knocking on our door. Its preferred hosts are cattle. It likes to get on cattle. It can get on other ruminants, small ruminants. It can get on non-ruminants, including us. And then there's some public health issues if this tick feeds on you. You can get sick from this tick feeding on you as well. But it also likes a lot of wildlife. In fact, most of the reports coming out from USDA is that possums and deer seem to be the top two wildlife hosts. When you go into any kind of pastured setting, those two wildlife are going to have ticks. And it's not just this tick, they're going to have other ticks. I see deer a lot differently than a lot of people. I see deer as tick bombs. When I get called in for tick issues on cattle, we're going out to the pastures and we're finding the deer tracks. And we'll try to figure out what kind of tick you're dealing with. And so deer are a preferred host for this tick and other ticks as well. This is a study that just came out at the end of last year where they think it's going to be highly successful. And of course, eastern Oklahoma is in the dark pink. Anywhere dark pink is considered a really good area for this tick to develop and expand rapidly. So some areas out west could be conducive, but it's just the environmental conditions are not as ideal as southeast and into eastern Oklahoma. But then it can get it all the way up into Michigan. So just kind of have this in the back of your mind. I work with the state veterinarian. If we have a suspicious tick, we'll look at it and try to confirm what it is. That's the newest thing kind of knocking at our door. here's the majority of external parasites that are going to hit you. And so I like to put this picture up here because these economic losses sneak up on you. So this is like when my dad and I used to work cattle. This is a while back. I didn't have any gray hair. But the things to look at is that he's not as quick on that head gate. And so when you're not as quick on that head gate, every third one is coming out and coming out fast. And so that's how these production losses hit you. How many of you kind of looked at your animals? I got a couple of flies. Not too bad. Then about 2 weeks later, I was like, oh my gosh, where did those flies come from? Or if you work your animals, you're working your animals, even in March, you work your animals, you put them through the chute, and I was like, where in the world are all these ticks coming from? And so the thing I want to advocate to you is that you try to get ahead of the ball a little bit. You try to get ahead of these losses. Horn flies are considered our #1 external parasite for beef animals across the nation. This number is an annual loss based off of losses and cost of control just to the U.S. beef cattle market annually. This pest is a major pest all the way from Idaho to Florida and everywhere in between. We even have horn flies in dry, arid California. We have a lot of horn flies in a lot of different areas. If you were to rank this list, probably for this area, whether you're going into southern Oklahoma and into Arkansas, you'd probably put ticks as #2. Ticks are always around in this area, especially on cattle. Horseflies would still probably be either 3 or 4, depending on the year, and then stable flies. Face flies, the only part of Oklahoma that we consistently get face flies is the far northeast corner. We don't have a lot of face flies. Face flies are a lot different in house flies because house flies can't transmit pink eye. Face flies can transmit pink eye. Face flies have an adapted mouth part. Now, don't talk about face flies in this talk much because it's more up in the Northwest, upper Midwest is where you're going to deal with this. But pink eye can be a major problem. That's why they're right here on this list. But these costs can sneak up on you, especially if you're not looking for some of these pests. The #1 pest I want to talk about is one that we're coming off of the season, and that's lice. Lice can be a major issue, whether you're in a cow-calf situation or in a stocker or any kind of backgrounding. Lice can get on cattle. The #1 louse species that we can find throughout the U.S. is the chewing louse. It has this broad head. This is the one that makes your animals itch. You see patches of hair just falling off. And this is the one causing that. What we consider what we call a treatment threshold when we want to try to get treatment ahead of when we see production losses is 2 or more lice per square inch. If you've ever run an animal through a chute and you know it's lousy, it's already above 2 or more. So we adjust that a little bit, but there are hidden costs associated with this pest. If you ever think about it, usually I drive down the road from December to February, I just see balls of hair on the fence line. And then in some cases, we've had producers that have had to actually go in there and repair some of those fencing because of how much rubbing their animals did. So hopefully it's not getting to that point for you guys, but if you have animals that are really rubbing and using fencing or equipment, that's a hidden cost that you're having to repair that equipment sooner than later because your animals are wearing it down because of the lice infestation. Here's a slide I like to put together because when we talk about lice control, a lot of people think that, well, I used to use Porons, they don't work. Porons are actually a really good product for lice. But Porons are non-systemic, meaning they don't absorb into that animal's bloodstream and spread throughout that whole body. That means the way a Poron works, especially for lice control, is that it's all by gravity. So if you don't treat from the withers to the tail head, you're not getting a really good application. And I'll tell you what, when you're pushing animals through the chute, sometimes we get a lot of good treatment from about the shoulder blades to halfway down the back. And that's really good. Or sometimes if you're going the other way, we get from the tail head to halfway down the back. And so that's not a really good application. The other issue, and this goes for internal parasites too, is that we're flat dosing animals. Because not every one of us has a scale. So it's amazing how many animals, my dad said, man, that's a 1,200 pound cow. 1,200 pounds, 1,250, 1,275. Not much above that or that range. So ideally, if you have access, at least if you can get an average of some animals. If you have access, you can put them on a trailer and put them on a platform scale somewhere and get an average of the group. That's better than just trying to guess and give a flat dose. Because a lot of times we're underdosing our animals. 20% are underdosed. I'd say 20% are overdosed for lice control, but majority of the time with porons, we're always underdosing, most of the time. Late application will provide best control. What that means is later, either in December or early January, is the best time to apply because that's when the reproductive cycle will really kick in for lice. And if you can treat about then, it's going to aid you later on. The other thing, we could have carriers. You can have animals that are just lice carriers, and they're going to be carriers every year. It doesn't matter if you treat them really well this year versus the next. You're going to have some animals that are just carriers. So really, one thing I want to advocate for lice control, the best thing to do is to isolate new animals. If you can isolate new animals, you're going to do a lot for your lice control program. I put this up here because we have 2 life stages that we can control really well, whether you're with a spray or a pour-on. It's the adult and the nymph stage. And so this stage we don't do very good at controlling. How many of you have ever heard the term nit picking? These are lice nits. Where that term came from is when indigenous people manually picked lice out of each other's hair. Nit picking is from this term. This is a lice nit. Why I put this up here is because our products are really good at controlling the adult and nymph. But our products, all of our products really aren't the best for just controlling this stage. However, and I do not advocate one product over the other unless we've seen sound research data. And one thing that I've seen is that there are some products that get this egg stage a lot better than the adult nymph stage. And the life cycle can vary, but when they're reproductively efficient, meaning January through March, they're in the egg stage anywhere from 7 to 10 days, and then the rest anywhere from 30 to 45 days. But when you think about this, if you treat once, you're not doing anything for those that are about to emerge. So it either requires a retreatment or a product that can actually kill the egg stage. And one of those products is this one. It's a new product. It's called Cleanup 2. It has all kinds of pests labeled on it, but I'll tell you why Bayer developed this is for lice control. This is really good for lice control because you're getting the product to where the pests are because it's a pour-on, and then what you do is that it has this diflubenzuron, which is an IGR. So what that diflubenzuron does is once they hatch out as the eggs, it prevents that nymph from growing. And so it kills it that way. The permethrin kills the adult and nymph as well. So it's a dual action product, and it's 2 different modes of action, so it's pretty good for lice control. You don't need to really retreat with this product unless it's a severe population. If you've got a really severe population, you may need to retreat because of just how many lice are out there. But in general, that's our #1 wintertime pest, our lice. If you use a pour-on, you'll need to retreat anywhere from 10 to 14 days later. And so that means you're going to have to bring those animals up again. So one thing I want to try to say is we work cattle, and we don't like bringing cattle up multiple times. But for lice control, to get good sound control, you've got to retreat if you use any other product than this one. The rest of this talk is going to be on ticks and flies. That's our these are the top 2 pest groups that are going to be affecting your animals. Especially in a summer grazing type program, these can impact it quite a bit. We have 3 blood-feeding flies that are common. Hornfly, again, is small. It always tends to feed with its head down or to the side, on the back, anywhere to the belly. Stable flies are about the size of a house fly, and it feeds on the legs with its head up. The stable fly head up, horn fly head down. And the horsefly, all over. If you get horseflies, this horsefly will feed on the brisket or on the face, on the side, on the belly, and the backside. So these are our three main blood-feeding flies. And if you want to think about this, when you have a stress such as a blood-feeding fly, they're going to cause damages. And so every time we see a certain percentage of an increase of these types of blood-feeding flies, we can see an impact to performance because of the irritation, which causes behavioral modifications. And sometimes in cattle that are infested with stable flies, they'll be standing in ponds when it's not really hot because stable flies feed on their legs and they're trying to get away from the stable fly feeding. The biggest thing is that your animals are having to eat more pounds of forage to put on that same pound of meat, whether it's because of milk from the cow to the calf, that's going to impact that weaning weight. And we know that when you get to certain levels, these top flies, we see diminished milk production. So it's flies on the cows just as important as the flies on the calves. Reduced weight gains from this, and then some of these can also transmit certain types of diseases. Common fly control issues that I get from producers is I don't use fly control because it doesn't work. Well, in some cases that's true. If you use the same thing over and over and over again, it's going to quit working for you because we have a lot of resistance. We have a lot of insecticide resistance in our flies, especially horn flies. We've got to rotate the chemicals. We've got to know what chemical is in each chemical class. I'm going to try to give you some helpful hints on that, but we don't have room in our budget. I'm going to show you some data that we're getting ready to publish that I think you do have room in your budget. No matter what the market's doing, there is room. We know that growing cattle gain 1.5 pounds per week extra when you keep horn flies below 200 flies per animal. A recent study out of Nebraska showed that weaning weights in calves was 10 to 20 pounds higher in the group that kept horn flies below 200. So there's some data out there that says it could be cost effective to implement some kind of fly control. The last one I always get is I don't use IGR, which is an insect growth regulator that you can get through a mineral feed supplement, because it doesn't work because my neighbors don't use anything. Well, it can work, but it's usually in combination with something else. The biggest thing with horn fly control is that are we rotating our products? If you use a pyrethroid year after year after year, they're going to become highly resistant. Horn flies are one of our most reproductively efficient flies that are associated with cattle. That means in this area, we get anywhere from 35 to 40 different generations from April to October. So when you have a fly that goes through that many generations, that means if you're going to select for a population that's going to be resistant, it's going to happen there because they go through their population fairly quickly. So it's important to know what chemical class you're buying. So Ultra Boss and Ultra Saber are in the exact same chemical class. Unfortunately, we don't have really any new products coming out. Organophosphates, you have Prolate Lintox, Coral, there's one generic one that you can spray. When you think of ear tags, you've got Diazinon, which is Corathon, Patriot, and then you've got the pyrethroid tags. Macrocyclic lactone, which is avamectin mainly, is XP820 or Tryzap in the two tags, or your porons as an Ivamac is a macrocyclic lactone. Ear tags, porons, and sprays, and then of course IGRs are disseminated through feed type products or minerals. These are our application techniques. We have cattle rubs, and we have dust bags still. But if you want those to work, you've got to make sure every animal's getting treated, not just 20% of your animals. Because if only 20% of your animals are treated, that means you could be selected for resistant populations without actually getting a dose that's going to kill the fly. So you want proper application as well. In this area, fly tags are still a viable option, but they're going to provide anywhere from 90 to 100 days. It's important when we try to figure out which 90 or 100 days we want that tag in, though. So that means you shouldn't be putting an insecticide or ear tag for fly control in your animals in March. You should be waiting until late May, first week of June, because our most intense hornfly season is July and August, and you want that tag working for you in July and August. If you put it in any time earlier than that, even April, that tag may peter out on you. And it's not to say that tag didn't work, it's just being exposed to a high level of flies for a long period of time. This is what our rotation is, and this is what we consider a 3-year rotation with insecticidal ear tags. And with organophosphate, say that you started this year with an organophosphate, that can be Patriot, Corathon. Then you go to a synergized pyrethroid. This could be Python Magnum, Python, or some sprays, and then macrocyclic lactone. But this is a 3-year rotation. If you decide to use ear tags, this is the ideal rotation. We know that can at least limit resistance. How resistance works is all genetic. We can either select for flies that have the genes that make them all resistant, or we still have susceptible flies interbreeding with resistant flies. So I have a mom and a dad, and on my dad's side, he's got type 1 diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. Guess what kind of genes I have? And so, of course, I have genes from my mom's side as well. And so some of those can either amplify that effect but I could also do things. And I'd love to eat a greasy hamburger every day. Or I, used to drink pop. I don't drink pop hardly at all now, once we found out that my dad was type 2 diabetic. That's genetics. And we can either do things to make flies more resistant, or we can do things to allow to delay those genes from establishing themselves. So each year, tag removal in the fall if you use insecticidal ear tags. IGRs, the thing you want to do with IGRs is get them out early. This time of year, you want to get them out April 1st. If you haven't gotten them out, you're still good. You can get them out. But an IGR is a preventative. If an IGR is to work, you've got to get it out early. And you want to get them out as a preventative because it kills only the maggot stage. So the flies developing in the manure, that's what it's killing. It's not killing the adult stage. It's killing the flies developing in the manure. That's how these products work. Consumption is key, though. If you've got a mineral product out there and the consumption isn't good, that means you don't have a lot of IGR in the manure either. You've got to have some way to monitor consumption, whether you're monitoring how much you're putting out and recording how long it's out there, or actually weighing it. So, but the easiest method is to keep track of how much you're putting out and how long it takes them to eat that 50-pound bag or 25-pound bag up. Here's a picture, and this goes back to the question. So this is a non-economical infestation or economic load of hornflies. These are all hornflies here. Right here, hornflies. And the way we tell, if you're a graduate student in my lab, you have the unfortunate task to count every fly on an animal. And so we do this through digital photography, though. We can take a high-quality image and blow it up, and we can count every fly on here. We do it on a per-side basis. We figured out that we can count one side and still get a good representative sample. But the thing I want you to understand is that this is a really low level of flies. What do you see on her back other than the flies? Her slobber. So she's already reacting. She's reacting to that fly, so where's her head not when she's tossing it back? It's not down eating. But this is how ear tags work. Ear tags are a non-systemic product. So if you put one tag per side, it gets one side covered really good. And then it kind of spreads throughout some of the oil layers. But if you don't have it on both sides, which side gets treated better? The side with the tag. So if you have two tags, it gets a more equal distribution of product. That's how the other thing I like to point out is your bulls are always going to have more hornflies, but I don't like putting tags in bulls. Because how much can they toss their head back versus a cow or heifer? They don't have the range. Younger bulls certainly do. Younger bulls can get back there and get a pretty good, but once that bull gets older, you're not getting to get the good product range for an ear tag. So what we try to advocate is if the bull's in a breeding program with tagged cows, he's getting product on him. If he's by himself in his own pasture, then he needs some kind of supplemental fly, whether it's a pour-on or spray. And if you put an ear tag in, you may get very decent control in younger bulls, but as it gets older, we don't see as good of a product coverage. Here's a cow in the same pasture, same date. She had over 500 flies. It's kind of hard to see, but these are all horn flies. This is just solid covered, all horn flies. And so if it gets to this level, you certainly want to get something in there. And sometimes animals can deal with it, but you certainly want to try to give them some kind of protection. Here's a study that came out of Georgia that showed, and it was mainly horn flies, that a percentage of heifers with mastitis showed that if you have fly control, this is Staph aureus, the main causative agent of certain kinds of mastitis, that when they implemented fly control, they got a 10-fold decrease in the percentage of heifers that had mastitis. We know that horn flies can aid in transmitting bacteria from one animal to the next, but this study was really good because it showed the decrease in the amount of mastitis in heifers just by implementing a horn fly control. Now in your area, you're gonna have to work with your vet if you have certain diseases that you deal with, but for horn flies, bacterial diseases or bacterial pathogens can be associated with them. Here's a chart we put together on different costs, because a lot of people see the initial cost of insecticidal pour-ons. It's actually pretty cheap to use a pour-on. It costs you anywhere from 50 cents to $1.90 a head if you put it on like you should. But when you consider how many times you have to retreat with a pour-on, it can get up to almost $10 a head. And whereas if you have a timely application of an insecticidal ear tag, it's half that cost. So even though ear tags, a lot of people say they don't work, if you use the same thing over and over, they certainly don't work, but a timely application will be cost effective versus reapplicating all the time. We also see the insecticidal spray. This is probably our cheapest, but it's usually our less effective type method because it's about bringing those animals up to spray them. If you have horn flies and you're going to use sprays, that means you're going to have to bring them up. Some people will put sprayers on their ATVs, and it can work, but the thing that we want to advocate is that if you're spending money and putting a spray on those animals every time you feed, that could lead to resistance, and really bad resistance, because you're not only getting enough product, because ATV sprayer is not going to soak an animal really well like it should to get good fly control. IGR is just variable. It's based off of consumption. It can be fairly cheap to incorporate it in the mineral. How many of you, that may be hard to see in the back, but the bottom one is called the vet gun. How many of you ever seen that? It's basically a gun that you get to shoot a pour-on out of. That's all that is it's a pour-on type product that's in a paintball that allows you to apply that pour-on out in the pasture. And it's very hit and miss as far as efficacy. And again, it's really fun treating some animals, but there is a technique to this. So we've done several trials, and we found out that we cheat. We put a little hay out every time, or cubes, to get them to stay. Because we can't get it. Because if you don't treat that high-headed animal first, that's going to take half the herd with her every time she takes off, then you're not going to get a very good treatment. The other thing is some of these balls, they recommend you hit them right behind the shoulder. Well, that's really not a good, effective product dissemination. So what we try to do is look at how much that animal, on average, can weigh and modify the dose that way. The newest thing on horn fly control is that we know that heavier animals as well as dark animals will always have more flies on them than any other animal. And it's the way a fly finds an animal. Contrast patterns. So flies use cues like carbon dioxide Have you ever wondered why maybe you're sitting in a backyard picnic and you're getting eaten up by mosquitoes and your friend never gets eaten or bit? So we release different things. We release different rates of carbon dioxide. We release different octanol from our sweat. And so different breeds of cattle do that as well. But the dark animals, there's two things. It's a contrast where that fly can find that animal a lot easier in a pasture. But there's also a kind of a heat profile coming off of a darker animal than a light-colored animal. Some of the newest research that says that darker, larger framed animals will always have more horn flies on them than others. Here's the newest product that's on the market. It's called Tryzap. Tryzap is a new ear tag. It has abamectin and zeta cypermethrin, I think. Yeah, zeta cypermethrin plus propionyl butoxide. We tried this. This is Ytex's rotation. Of course, they want you to buy their new ear tag first because it costs a little bit more, but it's a good ear tag though. This is their organophosphate product line, their pyrethroid product line, and their macrocyclic lactone product line. So it pretty much follows our recommendation as well, but it's adding this new tag in. Historically, I don't like combination tags because of resistance, but this one has performed very well, and what Ytex did really well is they didn't increase the amount of active ingredient to get this product out. They increased the amount of synergist, which is propionyl butoxide. Propionyl butoxide does nothing to kill the fly, but it allows these two ingredients to kill the fly better. So essentially it's the synergist. So here's last year's data. So red line control is this top one. That means untreated animals. And then we tagged them at different times. It's kind of hard to disseminate. This is just our monthly observations, but when you look at the cumulative effect, what this shows statistically is that you should be tagging in May. If you tag in May, it's more cost effective than tagging in April, but if you wait till June, you've already allowed that population to get too high. We already knew this tag was a good tag, and again, we're not looking at 200 over on that axis over there. This is the cumulative fly population for the whole fly season. So anything that's keeping anything below 1,000 is actually pretty good, but these two, so tagging in May is what was most cost effective in the long run. So May tagging seems to always be better. Here's a trial we did out of Alfalfa County. We just took what the producers wanted to do. Basically what this shows is that anytime you combine a good ear tag with an IGR early, it provides the lowest amount of flies, or it gives the best amount of fly control. This producer, actually, this was his rotation. The green bars that are kind of big right here, Ultra Boss. So every 2 weeks, he'd go in there and apply Ultra Boss. 2 weeks later, he'd apply Ultra Saber. Guess what? Those are exactly the same thing. They have different trade names, but they're in the same chemical class, so they kill the flies exactly the same way. All this shows is that anytime you combine a ear tag with an IGR, a decent ear tag, which is XP820, we get the lowest amount of flies. Here's a trial we did up at K-State on some stocker animals because we were getting questions about long range. Long range is not labeled for horn flies, and it shouldn't be because of resistance, but we tested it and it performed very well, but we compared it to a Carathon tag that's been out on the market. But what we wanted to do is see what's the performance of this. Again, we have horn flies on here. Here's our little break. How many horn flies are on this animal? This animal, again, I have a student, not me. We count this. There's 270 horn flies on there. There's one other fly on this animal. You see it at the bottom? That's a stable fly. Stable fly at the bottom. And again, it's hard to tell, but that fly's head is up and all these flies are down. And that's how we can tell the difference a lot of times. But what I wanted to show you, this is the weight gain advantage of Carathon versus long range. And of course, each treatment, fly treatment, we divided into no implant or Ralgro or Revlar G as well. Again, some of this, the weight advantage is all related to the fly treatment. And so what we showed is that we did this variable marginal gain that ag economists have developed. So it's a price slide scale from the difference between a 6-weight animal to a 5-weight animal with the average OKC West price from 2010 to 2018. And so we calculate this price slide, and then from the data that we generated from this study, we get this VMG, or dollars per pound gain. And then we do a labor cost, and we include the treatment cost and the labor cost. Of course, when you think about why is the labor cost more for a tag than an injectable product? How long does it take you to put 2 ear tags in per animal versus an injectable if you do it with a, you can,
3 times as long.
Yep. So it takes you longer on an hourly basis to apply an ear tag than it does. That's why this cost is higher. But this is on a per animal basis. Cost of treatment is quite a bit different, only $4.75 for a Corathon tag for 2 tags. That's supposed to say 10, sorry, that's $10 an animal for long range. This is a net profit based off of the weight gain advantage from our stocker trial. We got almost a $12 profit. Of course, it's different than our long range because of the cost of treatment. Cost of treatment is quite a bit lower. This is what happens if you have a slide, a 50% slide in the market. So your prices go down. So if you think, here's the previous slide, 6 weights, $1.62 per pound starting off, and it's only $1.59 per pound. This is a price slide. Again, you get a net profit that's almost equal to your cost of control. So you're kind of balancing out, even though you had a 50% slide in the market. And then this is what happens if you go to 2015 prices. If you have a really good market going into place, you have an increase, we get a net profit of almost $20 per animal. So again, the reason long range, even though long range provided more fly control in general and a better weight gain, the cost of control. The other thing is long range, we'll see resistance issues with this type of product. This is just summarized how we calculate this. With the Corathon ear tag, we got about an 18.9, about 19 pounds per head weight gain over this time period. It led to almost a $12 net profit. 22-pound weight gain with long range, which led to less net profit because of cost of control. Fly control, especially for horn flies, can pay for itself if you can get it in there and manage it. Now, it's not throwing the kitchen sink at it either. You want to be timely and efficient. Pour-ons are great, but you just understand you got to reapply that product throughout the summer. Sprays are great, but you're going to have to reapply that. Ear tags, if you time it right, you don't have to reapply those. So May or June is when we're recommending to apply those. Stable flies, again, are a blood-feeding fly. They feed mainly on the legs. They have been associated with anthrax, anaplasma, as other things. But where these things are coming from are the hay feeding sites that you have over the winter. These prefer hay feeding rings. If you anytime you concentrate animals into an area with hay, this fly is going to breed in it. We found that you could get 12,000 stable flies per week per square yard from a hay feeding environment. So horse flies, only the females feed. We know these things are also associated with pastures that have what we call these open canopy cedars. So not completely closed canopy pastures with cedar in it, but 1 or 2 mature eastern red cedars interspersed with young eastern red. We'll have more of these flies. Again, these are known vectors of anaplasmosis. Hopefully you don't have animals that look like this. This picture was taken up near Nowata, which is northeast Oklahoma, two summers ago, I think. All that is from horseflies. It can be very severe, and that's why they can transmit diseases. Again, what I really want to advocate is there's only 2 flies involved in anaplasm, and really it's the horsefly is the more efficient carrier of it. Stable flies have been shown, but it's very irregular in how good they are at transmitting. But horseflies are certainly good carriers of anaplasma, but it's really your ticks that are going to be transmitting your anaplasma. This is actually some replacement heifers from Dr. Lawman's herd. They had some ear ticks. This is about 2 years ago. These animals were infested the first week of March. Is when they had these population loads. This is what the ears look like. Through Dr. Lawman's help, we were able to look at how much decrease we could get by just putting a spray on it, because putting an ear tag on is way too early for this tick. Because again, we're dealing with this tick in March, and so on average, these replacement heifers almost had 12 of these ticks per ear. And then we reduced it to less than 2. With a cheap insecticidal spray, we got an 83% reduction at a cost of only 15 cents a head. 83% reduction is pretty good when it comes to external parasites. And it only costs us but what we did, we're not spraying the whole animal. As Dr. Lawman's crew would run those animals through, all we did was spray the jawline, the ears, the poll of the animal, and down the brisket a little bit, because that's how the tick gets in up to the ears. And this lasted for about 4 weeks. That allowed us to get into the fly control season. Then we put some tags in that allowed us to get some fly control later. Where are these ticks coming from? Wild hogs. 52% of the feral swine sampled in Texas from this study in 2016 had ear ticks on it. We think these things are maintaining the tick as well. So if you need another reason to get rid of them, here's another reason. So they're just a mess anyway. Have you ever seen a pasture? These things come in. They cause a lot of damage. And so that alone should be justification. But again, Gulf Coast tick are always on the poll and the ear. That's where you're going to find this tick. It doesn't cause a lot of direct production loss, but it causes gotch ear in calves, where you see the ears start folding up. Some sale barns will dock that if they see it, but just depending on where you're at. American dog tick. This is the tick you don't see a lot. It's all along the brisket, what we call the axillary, or kind of around the udders or in between the 2 front legs. This is the primary tick involved in anaplasmosis maintenance. This is what we call the biological vector. That means Anaplasma marginale, the pathogen that causes anaplasmosis, is replicating inside this tick just as much as when after it feeds on an infected animal. And so it's maintaining that bacteria throughout the environment. How about this one, Lone Star tick? This is the one that's related to red meat allergy, but this has nothing to do with the tick feeding on beef animals. It has everything to do with the tick feeding on you. There's a low level of alpha-gal sugar in this tick's saliva, and there's that same type of sugar in red meat. So it's just like any allergy. You can either wean yourself to deal with it, or you can just react to it sometimes. Some people have more severe reactions than others. We know that this tick is associated with pastures that have more eastern red cedar. In fact, we see a westward expansion out west of this tick because of eastern red cedar. Tick control, Gulf Coast, we can control those easily with an ear tag, but really one of the most effective means is some kind of spray that you just target the ears. Pour-on can work if you wipe a little bit of pour-on on the ears. That can work as well. The 2 most effective methods for controlling most tick populations is the combination of pasture rotation out of problem pastures in the month of May and June. May and June rotation out of problem pastures, and then combine that with some kind of either pour-on or injectable or spray for tick control, and you get the best tick control. We also know that burning works. We know that burning will reduce ticks. Burning will reduce flies. And in fact, we took this sample in the peak hornfly season in Iowa and Oklahoma, and we saw a 40% reduction in those animals that were in what we call those patch burning pastures. So patch burning, you're burning patches, not the whole pasture. It's almost like rotational grazing concept, but you're using fire to drive their grazing behavior. We know that also if you burn, it reduces the amount of ticks on both the calves and the cows. So burning works. Take-home message, fly control can pay for itself and give you a profit. Combination of IGR with some other kind of fly control, mainly an ear tag, provides the best control. Cost can add up if you're having to reapply. Ear tags gave us almost a $12 net profit per animal. Ear ticks can be reduced by 83% by just putting a directed spray into the ears and on top of their poll. But you have to put them through a chute to do that if you're going to do it effectively. If you put them into a small pen, just make sure you're only spraying about 5 animals at a time, which can become challenging, I know. But we know if you're only treating 5 animals at a time, you'll get that directed spray a little bit better. With that, we have a website, livestockbugs.okstate.edu. It's linked to the beef extension website. And so all those hornfly grafts. We also, Brian Frecking has put together a good graphic on which tags are in actually organophosphate, which are pyrethroid, and which are macrocyclic lactone. The only one that we don't have up there is Tryzap yet, but livestockbugs.okstate.edu. We have this Vet Pest X, but it's a database that you can enter in what pest you're dealing with and how you, and all the different control products you can get for that. This over here was one of the best methods to control ticks, I'll tell you that. We don't have that anymore. It's a dipping bat. This is screwworm. USDA still spends millions of dollars to keep the screwworm out of the U.S. beef production. And that's why ear tags were developed. Ear tags were developed to keep ticks out of ears because the tick feeding provided wounds for the screwworm fly to lay its eggs, and these white things are all maggots that are feeding on live tissue. And so we still have things that are knocking on our door that we have to be diligent about. Screwworm is one, the cattle fever tick is another one, and now we have this new tick coming along. Plus all these other things that are bugging you all the time.